I'm playing as an android-made robot who's riding on a robot cat while shooting at another robot by throwing back its rockets. This is insane. So Mischief Makers is a game developed by Treasure for the Nintendo 64 back in 1997 and was published by Enix before the merger with Squaresoft. It's a very out there game, being one of the only 2D platformers released on the console. You play as Marina Lightyears, a robotic maid who can pick up pretty much anything, with the main mechanic being centered around you picking up and shaking different objects to interact with the game's environment. The main plot of this game is this episodic structure involving you saving your creator Professor Theo from this evil emperor and his gang of villains, all whilst exploring the world of Planet Cleanser. The game is very light-hearted and humorous. Each world is set like an episode of an anime involving all sorts of hijinks, with it ending in a climactic boss fight to save the professor, with him then being kidnapped again as a reoccurring gag. The actual gameplay is a variety of different things. Some missions will have you run favours for this planet's inhabitants, which will involve backtracking. But other times, this game will be a linear platformer, simply having you go from point A to point B, all whilst making the most of Marina's moveset. For a Nintendo 64 game, Mischief Makers is extremely responsive. You move with the D-pad instead of the analog stick and can dash and hover by repeatedly tapping the input. Combining this movement tech with Marina's ability to grab onto and throw herself off of things makes movement extremely satisfying and fluid. Treasure really stuck to their guns by developing a 2D game back in 1997. Meanwhile, it felt like every developer was experimenting to mix results with 3D gaming. If I could compare this game to anything else, I would say the look and feel reminded me of Klonoa on the PlayStation, especially with the 2.5D art style having sprites in a 3D environment, as well as grabbing onto and throwing enemies. Unfortunately, Mischief Makers was struggling to find its audience back in 1997, having to compete with gamers only wanting 3D games at the time, with other companies like Konami's critically beloved Castlevania Symphony of the Night also struggling at the time with sales due to its 2D pixel art. It really felt like there was no room for 2D platformers at this time in gaming, but unlike Symphony of the Night, which eventually got its cult following, Mischief Makers seems to not have had much of a legacy in the mainstream gaming sphere. Add the fact that the promotion for this game in the West was horrendous. Seriously, check this advertisement for the game in America. It makes the Wii U trailers look tame in comparison.
Hey man, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad. No more cowboy ghosts, right? You gotta understand something. I ride the Clancers. I have the answers. I play Greek dodgeball with a Persian kitty. Just me, Marina Lightyears, and a lot of shaking. Oh sure, those bees need their honey, but I need gold gems. The professor cannot wait forever. The evil empire will not allow it. So, where are you going?
Here's fine. New Mischief Makers, only on Nintendo 64. It's a trip.
I apologize for showing that. This game really struggled to find any kind of following for the longest time until the days of YouTube. On a side note, let's look at the game's covers in Japan compared to what the West got. Okay, the Japanese art has that nice hand-drawn look to it, and you have Marina demonstrating her abilities, showing what this game is about. Good stuff. Okay, onto the Western cover.
What the hell is this?
Damn, no wonder this didn't appeal to gamers back then. This really doesn't show anything about the game. I doubt that Nightmare Fuel 3D model does it any favors either. Also, this cover art is pretty misleading since in the actual game Marina doesn't appear to be 3D at all. Bear in mind that during this time, the internet wasn't a public thing yet, you barely know anything about a game, there was no online reviews, and at best the most you'd rely on is magazines detailing the game or word of mouth. The box art was everything. If you was to pick a game to rent for the weekend at Blockbuster with only the cover to go off, which option would you pick here? Exactly. There was a strange fascination with games in the West opting for 3D models on the cover over the hand-drawn art. None of these look good compared to what Japan had, with Ico for the PlayStation 2 being the best example of this issue. Anyway, sorry for the tangent, I just think the context here is important for why Mischief Makers has next to no cult following today, which is a shame really. The game has arguably aged much better than most of the Nintendo 64's library. The weird faces may be off-putting to some, but the strange geometry and out there character designs come off as very charming and of their time. I love how the game is aware of its odd tone with characters often breaking the fourth wall. You can tell the developers had a lot of fun making this game with how out there and unique it is. Speaking of, I haven't even talked about the best part of this game, that being the boss fights. The spectacle they bring, along with the screen's aspect ratio going all over the place, is amazing. It's here where Marina's move kit really gets pushed to its limits, having you use her grab ability to punish the boss's attacks. There's a very reflex reactive kind of flow to these bosses. No waiting for weak points to be revealed or jumping on the boss's head 3 times here. At nearly any point, you can grab onto the boss and use your shake to send them flying. The whole motion to it is all incredibly smooth, with these animations further adding to that. The boss fights are very expressive, even having multiple forms. Sometimes you'll have to grab onto a missile and throw it back to deal damage. You can even use your grab as a makeshift block, and to some degree even as a parry, which is kind of insane given how old this game is. I'm not sure where parrying originally came from, but this is definitely the earliest example I've ever seen it, with it predating Street Fighter 3rd Strike, which is pretty awesome. There's a surprising amount of player expression here in these boss fights. If you happen to run out of health and face death, which is very likely, this game can be pretty difficult, you are then given a very innovative life system. During each level, you'll collect these red crystals, which is this game's current set. Upon a death, you can spend these crystals to bring Marina back into action, with there being different perks for how much you're willing to spend, such as extra health. This consideration on losing current set upon dying really reminded me of Mario Odyssey. It's kind of wild because for many modern players, including myself, the life systems in these games can be a relic that dates back all the way to the arcade era as a means of getting as much money out of the player as possible. It's only fairly recently where pretty much every modern game has phased them out, which is why Mischief Makers back in 1997 was really onto something with this system and cuts out any frustration that you typically run into with an old game like this. It was certainly way ahead of its time and has helped it age well when playing the game today. That being said, I do have a few small criticisms for this game. The biggest one, and from what I've seen in most reviews, is how the game takes a good while to start getting really good. Namely, the tutorial level at the start of the game, a lot of it is just text boxes, and whilst I don't mind them, the level design already communicates this well enough for the player to understand how to progress. I think this tutorial just overly explains to the player what they need to do, which ironically makes it even more confusing. It kind of threw me for a loop, and I'm sure some players might get turned off by this, which is a shame because outside of this, the rest of the game is pretty much golden, so having a weak first impression is kind of sad when compared to the rest of the experience. One personal complaint I have, and this is completely a me thing, but I just hate maze levels in general. Never liked them in the old 2D Mario games, and here it's pretty obnoxious. Thankfully it's only used in 1 or 2 levels, so you won't have to put up with them for long. I guess one final complaint I could maybe find is that for some players the controls might seem a bit strange at first, but trust me, they are very intuitive once you come to terms with them. There's just a bit of a skill curve when it comes to this aspect of the game, but once you understand everything, you'll be pulling off some pretty fun movement options. And that's Mischief Makers on the Nintendo 64, an incredible and overlooked platformer. When I did some research for this game, surprisingly, it's never been re-released on any platform, no Wii Shop, eShop, or even Best Of compilation. Hopefully it gets added to the Switch Online service one day. Surprisingly, you'd think this would heighten its price on the second-hand market, but it's fairly accessible even today, which further shows the game's obscure origins. Similar to my Mega Man Legends video, I kind of wanted to make this review as another example of just how many amazing games there are if you go back and try something maybe outside of your comfort zone that is lesser known. I feel like Mischief Makers is another example of seeing what you might have missed, especially when a lot of the Nintendo 64's library is mainly known for its first-party titles and some of Rare's offerings. The small amount of third-party titles the system had seems to get forgotten when talking about the N64's library. Thanks for watching to the end of this video, and any feedback in the comments would be appreciated. Did you ever play Mischief Makers back in the day? I'm curious. Thanks for watching and have a nice rest of your day.
Die!